My name is Ethan Thorne. I am 32 years old, a lead software engineer for a tech firm in Seattle, and a single father to a 4-year-old boy named Leo. If you looked at my life from the outside, you would see a success story, a high-rise condo, a thriving career, and a son who is the center of my universe. But what you wouldn't see is the invisible weight I had been carrying on my shoulders for 6 long years, a weight that nearly crushed the life out of me 2 months ago. It was a Tuesday evening, a day that started like any other. I was working from home, finishing up a sprint for a major cloud update, while Leo sat on the kitchen floor building a spaceship out of magnetic tiles. I'd ordered a health-conscious Thai salad from a local spot we usually trust. I'm a guy who lives by logic and code, so I always double-check the ingredients. I have a severe, life-threatening allergy to peanuts. It has been my reality since I was a child. I'd specified no peanuts in the app, called the restaurant to confirm, and even did a quick visual check when it arrived. But cross-contamination doesn't care about your precautions. The first bite was fine. The second bite changed everything. It started as a faint tingle on my lips, a sensation I hadn't felt in years, but one my brain recognized instantly. Within 60 seconds, the tingle turned into a fire. My throat began to tighten as if an invisible hand were squeezing it. My chest felt like it was being crushed by a hydraulic press. I've lived with this fear my whole life, but experiencing it while alone with a 4-year-old is a different kind of terror. "Daddy, why is your face red?" Leo asked, dropping a blue tile. His voice sounded like it was coming from the end of a long, dark tunnel. I couldn't answer him. I was focused on one thing: AR. I stumbled toward the cabinet where I keep my EpiPens, my movements clumsy and heavy. My vision was starting to tunnel, black spots dancing at the edges of my sight. I found the pen, slammed it into my thigh, and felt that surge of adrenaline hit my system, but I knew it wasn't enough. I'd had a rebound reaction once before. I needed an ER, and I needed it now. As I slumped against the kitchen counter, gasping for breath, I managed to dial 911. I croaked out my address before the phone slipped from my sweat-slicked hand. But then, a second wave of panic hit me. Leo. The paramedics would take me away. Child Protective Services might be called if there was no guardian. I couldn't leave my son alone in an empty house with strangers while I was unconscious in an ICU. My mind raced through a list of people I could call. My friends were all at least 40 minutes away in the city. There was only one option who lived close enough to get here before the ambulance left. My parents. They lived 15 minutes away. For the past 6 years, I had been the good son. I'd been paying their $3,200 mortgage every month. I'd paid for their new SUV, their medical bills, and even the very phone my father was about to answer. I told myself I was doing it because family takes care of each other. But deep down, I was buying their presence. With trembling fingers, I pulled up the family group chat. My vision was blurring so badly I could barely see the icons. I hit the call button on my father's name. It rang, and rang, and rang. On the 5th ring, he picked up, but he didn't say hello. Instead, I heard the thumping bass of house music and the clinking of glasses. In the background, I heard my sister Sienna laughing that high-pitched, performative laugh she uses when she's the center of attention. Tonight was the launch party for her organic skincare line, a business I'd bankrolled to the tune of $50,000 just last year. "Ethan, make it quick." My father's voice was impatient, almost annoyed. "We are right in the middle of Sienna's ribbon cutting. It's a big night for her." "Dad." My voice was a thready whisper, my lungs burning. "Allergic reaction. Bad. 911. Coming. Please. Take Leo. Please. Come." There was a pause. I heard muffled voices. My mother's sharp tone cut through the music in the background. "What does he want now?" "Tell him we are busy." "Listen, Ethan," my dad said, his voice hardening. You are a grown man. You have always been so dramatic about these things. You have a phone. You have neighbors. We've worked for months on this launch for your sister. We can't just walk out because you have a sniffle. Figure it out." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in disbelief, my heart hammering against my ribs. I tried to call back, but it went straight to voicemail. Then, the phone buzzed. A notification from the group chat. It was a text from my mother. It felt like a physical blow to the stomach. "Ethan, enough. You have always been such a nuisance and a drain on our energy. You think because you have money you can command our time whenever you want. We are with Sienna tonight. It's her time to shine. Figure it out yourself and stop being so selfish." Then, a second message appeared. It was from Sienna. No words. Just a laughing emoji and a photo of her holding a glass of champagne with my parents beaming behind her in their best evening wear. The room felt like it was spinning. Leo was crying now, clutching my leg, sensing the life or death tension. "Daddy, please wake up." Something broke inside me in that moment. It wasn't my heart that had been breaking slowly for years. It was the contract. The invisible agreement where I provided the lifestyle and they provided the illusion of a family, in the cold, harsh light of my kitchen, gasping for air while my parents chose a skincare launch over my life. The contract was null and void. I realized then that I was alone. But I wasn't helpless. I used the last of my strength to search for a private medical escort and 24-hour emergency childcare service, the kind of premium service I could afford because I was the one making the money they were currently spending. I hit book now for an emergency dispatch, authorized a $2,000 immediate retainer, and sent a one-handed text to my neighbor, asking her to just sit on my porch until the service arrived. When the paramedics burst through the door 3 minutes later, I was on the floor, Leo cradled in my arm. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I didn't look for my parents' car in the driveway. I didn't check my phone for a just kidding text. I looked at my son and whispered, "I've got you, Leo. It's just us now." As the ambulance doors slammed shut and the sirens began to wail, I made a mental list, not of what I needed to do to survive the night the doctors would handle that, but of what I was going to do the moment I could hold a pen. I was done being a nuisance. I was done being a drain. I was about to become a ghost. By the time I reached the hospital, the morphine and steroids were starting to work, but the fire in my veins had been replaced by a cold, hard resolve. From my hospital bed, while the monitors beeped and the nurses checked my vitals, I logged into my banking app. One by one, I hit cancel on the recurring transfers, the mortgage, the insurance, the allowance for Sienna. It felt like I was cutting the tethers of a sinking ship. 2 weeks later, there was a knock on my door. I spent 5 days in the hospital. 5 days of sterile white walls, the rhythmic hum of the heart monitor, and the quiet tread of nurses checking my vitals every 4 hours. In all that time, my phone remained silent. There were no "I'm sorry" texts, no panicked voicemails, and certainly no one standing in the hallway waiting for visiting hours to begin. It's a strange thing, lying in a hospital bed realizing that the people you've spent your entire life trying to please wouldn't even skip a cocktail party to see if you were still breathing. But as the steroids cleared the inflammation from my lungs, a different kind of clarity took hold. I had time to think. I had time to look back at the last 32 years and finally see the Thorne family for what it actually was. Growing up, I learned very early that love in our house came with a ranking system. My younger sister, Sienna, was always at the top. She was the visionary, the creative soul, the one whose every whim was treated like a divine revelation. When she was 6 and wanted to be a ballerina, my parents bought her the finest shoes and spent every weekend at recitals. When she was 16 and decided she was a photographer, they bought her a $5,000 camera setup. When she announced she was going to be an influencer and launch a skincare line, my mother cried happy tears, calling her a pioneer of the digital age. Then there was me. I was the stable one. I was the practical one. When I told my father I wanted to study software engineering, he didn't cheer. He didn't tell me he was proud. He just nodded and said, "That's a safe choice, Ethan. You'll always be able to take care of yourself." At the time, I took it as a compliment. I thought it meant they trusted me. I didn't realize it was actually a release of liability. By being practical, I had effectively opted out of their emotional support because I could handle things. I was expected to handle everything, including them. The financial exploitation started almost immediately after I landed my first major role at a top-tier tech firm in Seattle. I was 26, earning more money than I knew what to do with, and feeling that desperate, lingering need to finally hear my father say he was proud of me. Dad called me on a Thursday evening. I remember it clearly because I was out celebrating a successful product launch with my team. His voice was tight, practiced in its humility. "Ethan, I'm in a bit of a bind. The property taxes are due, and things are a little tight this month. Your mother's car needs a new transmission, too. Could you help us out? Just this once." Just this once was a $5,000 wire transfer. I sent it without hesitation. I felt like a hero. I felt like I was finally the son he wanted. But just this once turned into a monthly subscription to their lifestyle. Within 6 months, I was paying their $3,200 mortgage. Then I was paying their health insurance premiums. Then it was the emergency home repairs, the roof leak that was never actually fixed, the furnace that supposedly died, the landscaping that had to be done to keep the property value up. I kept a spreadsheet. I don't know why I started it. Maybe it was the engineer in me needing to see the data, or maybe it was a subconscious insurance policy. Whatever the reason, the numbers were staggering. Month after month, year after year. I was funneled into their bank accounts. When I got married, the pressure didn't stop. When my wife and I welcomed Leo into the world, I thought surely they would see that I had my own family to support now. But it only got worse. When my marriage fell apart and my ex-wife moved across the country, leaving me as a single father with a 1-year-old and a demanding career, I reached out to my mother. "Mom, I'm drowning," I told her over the phone. I was running on 3 hours of sleep, trying to prepare for a board meeting while Leo had a double ear infection. "Can you and Dad come up for just a weekend? I just need a few hours to catch up on work and sleep." "Oh, Ethan," she sighed. "We'd love to, really. But Sienna is having such a hard time right now. Her first boutique just closed, and she's absolutely devastated. She needs us here to help her clear her head. You're so strong, honey. You've always been the stable one. You'll figure it out." That was the mantra. You'll figure it out. So I did. I figured it out by hiring help I couldn't always afford emotionally. I figured it out by working until 2 a.m. after Leo went to sleep. And all the while, the automatic transfers kept going out. $3,200 for the mortgage, $1,000 for the family insurance, $1,500 for Sienna's marketing expenses. I looked at my spreadsheet on the third night in the hospital. I pulled it up on my phone, my hand still a bit shaky from the IV. Total, given over 6 years, $280,000. That was a house. That was Leo's college fund. That was my early retirement. I had been carrying them on my back while they stepped on my fingers. And the moment I actually needed them, the moment I was literally gasping for air, they called me a nuisance. They told me I was a drain on their energy, lying there in that hospital bed, watching the sun set over the Seattle skyline. The resentment I'd been suppressing for a decade finally boiled over. It wasn't a hot, screaming anger. It was cold. It was surgical. I realized that my parents didn't love me for who I was. They loved me for what I provided. I was a utility to them. Like a power company or a water line. You don't thank the faucet for the water, you only complain when it stops running. Well, I decided right then and there. The water was about to stop. On my final day in the hospital, I sat up, ignored the ache in my chest, and opened my banking app. It took less than 2 minutes. I deleted the recurring transfers. I revoked the secondary credit cards I'd given my mother for emergencies. I changed the passwords to my Netflix, my Amazon, and even the family's shared cloud storage where they backed up photos of their luxury vacations I had paid for. I felt a strange sense of peace as I watched the confirmation screens pop up. I wasn't just saving money, I was reclaiming my life. When the nurse came in to give me my discharge papers, she smiled kindly. "Any family coming to pick you up?" "Ethan?" "No," I said. And for the first time in years, the word didn't make me feel sad. It made me feel powerful. "I've got a car service waiting. I'm going home to my son." I knew the storm was coming. I knew that the moment they realized the money was gone, the nuisance would suddenly become very important to them again. But I didn't expect how quickly it would escalate, or who would be the one to knock on my door 2 weeks later. It wasn't my parents. It wasn't Sienna. It was the last person I ever expected to see standing on my porch with a look of absolute fury in his eyes. The knock on my door wasn't the frantic, demanding pounding of my father, or the sharp, impatient rap of my mother. It was 3 slow, measured strikes, the kind of knock that carries the weight of authority. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel, my heart rate spiking. I wasn't ready to face my parents yet. I had been home for 10 days, slowly regaining my strength, spending every waking moment making up for lost time with Leo. The silence from my family had been total until 48 hours ago, when the first mortgage-due autopay failed to clear. Since then, my phone had been a graveyard of user-blocked notifications. I looked through the peephole and froze. Standing on my porch was a tall, imposing man in a charcoal wool coat. His silver hair was perfectly groomed, and his posture was as straight as a support beam. He held a leather briefcase with the kind of confidence only a man who had spent 40 years on the federal bench could possess. It was Uncle Victor. Victor was my father's older brother, but they hadn't spoken in nearly 5 years. My parents always told me Victor was toxic and judgmental, a man who cared more about the law than his own flesh and blood. As a result, I had kept my distance, believing their version of the story. I opened the door. My voice caught in my throat. "Uncle Victor?" He didn't say a word at first. He just looked at me, really looked at me, his sharp gray eyes scanning my face, settling for a moment on the lingering paleness of my skin. Then, without an invitation, he stepped inside. I heard about the accident. "Ethan," he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble. "I saw the messages you received in that group chat. Your Aunt Sarah, my wife, is still on the list. She showed me what they said. While you were in that ambulance." He walked into my kitchen and set his briefcase on the island. "I've watched this from the sidelines for a long time. I watched you become the family's silent benefactor while they treated you like an inconvenience. I stayed away because your father made it clear I wasn't welcome. But after what happened 2 weeks ago, I decided I was done staying away." I sat down on a bar stool, my legs feeling a bit weak. I cut them off. "Victor." I canceled everything. "I know," Victor said, a small, grim smile touching his lips. "Your father called me this morning. He wanted legal advice on how to restrain you. He claimed you were mentally incompetent due to the allergic shock, and that he needed to take over your estate to protect your assets." I felt a chill run down my spine. They weren't just angry about the money, they were already plotting to take control of my life now that I had stopped giving it away freely. "Don't worry," Victor said, opening his briefcase. He didn't get far. "But before we talk about your father's delusions, we need to talk about where your money has actually been going. Because I've spent the last 3 days doing what I do best, finding the truth." He pulled out a manila folder and pushed it across the granite. "You thought you were paying their mortgage, right? $3,200 a month for the last 6 years. "Yes," I said. "They told me they were in a hole after Dad's company downsized." Victor tapped a document in the folder. I ran a title search on their property. Richard and Helen paid off their mortgage in full back in 2018. They've owned that house free and clear for nearly 4 years. The room seemed to tilt. Then, where was the $3,200 going every month? Into a shell account, Victor replied, which was then used to pay the lease on a luxury condo in downtown Seattle, a creative studio for Sienna, designer furniture, high-end lighting. The works. You weren't keeping a roof over your parents' heads. Ethan, you were bankrolling your sister's vanity project while she told everyone she was a self-made entrepreneur. I stared at the numbers on the page. Over $150,000 just for a studio Sienna barely used, except to take photos for her Instagram. But that's not the worst of it, Victor continued, flipping to a second set of records. Remember 2 years ago? The cardiac scare your mother had? The $15,000 you paid for her out-of-pocket medical bills because their insurance supposedly wouldn't cover the specialist? I nodded, my chest tightening. I had worked 80 hours a week to cover that bill. I had been terrified I was going to lose her. Victor slid a color-coded invoice toward me. It wasn't from a hospital. It was from a private plastic surgery center in Bellevue. Your mother didn't have a heart procedure, Ethan. She had a full face and neck lift. They told you it was life or death, so you wouldn't ask questions. They used your fear for her life. To pay for her vanity. I felt a surge of nausea. I had sacrificed time with my son, time I could never get back to pay for a facelift and a luxury condo. And all the while, they were laughing at how stable and practical I was. Why are you telling me this now, Victor? I whispered. Because facts have a way of speaking for themselves, he said. And because I'm hosting my 60th anniversary gala next Saturday, the entire Thorne family will be there. Your parents, Sienna, and all the aunts and uncles who have been told that you are the one who has had a psychotic break. He leaned forward, his eyes burning with a quiet, judicial fury. They've been spinning a narrative. Ethan, they're telling everyone that you're withholding their support because you've lost your mind. They're planning to use my party to gather sympathy and stage an intervention to get you back under their thumb. Victor stood up and closed his briefcase. I want you to be there, but I don't want you to argue. I don't want you to scream. I want you to bring your spreadsheet, bring the bank statements, bring every record of every cent you've ever sent them. You want me to humiliate them? I asked. No, Victor said, walking toward the door. I want you to do what you've always done. I want you to be practical. I want you to present the evidence. Let the family see exactly what kind of burden you've been for the last 6 years. He stopped at the door and looked back at me. They called you a nuisance. Ethan, it's time they found out exactly what happens when that nuisance stops paying for their masks. The Seattle Gold and Country Club was a fortress of mahogany, silk, and crystal. It was the kind of place where people spoke in hushed, polished tones, and where every smile felt like a carefully managed PR move. As I pulled into the circular driveway, the valet took my car, and I felt a heavy, cold weight in my chest. In my right hand, I held Leo's small, warm palm. In my left, I gripped a leather portfolio containing the manila folder Uncle Victor had given me, along with my own meticulously documented spreadsheets. I felt like a man walking into a deposition, but the trial tonight was for my own life. Remember the plan. Buddy, I whispered to Leo as we entered the grand foyer. You are going to hang out with Aunt Sarah and play with the stickers she has. I just have to talk to some people for a little bit. Will there be cake? Leo asked, his eyes wide as he took in the massive chandeliers. The best cake in the city, I promised. Uncle Victor's wife, Sarah, met us near the coat check. She was a kind woman with silver hair and a sharp intellect that mirrored Victor's. She took Leo's hand and gave me a look that was part pity, part warrior-like solidarity. He's safe with me. Ethan, focus on what you need to do. Victor is already at the podium. I took a deep breath, adjusted my tie, and walked into the ballroom. The room was packed. Nearly 100 members of the extended Thorne family and the Seattle legal elite were there. I spotted them almost immediately. My parents and Sienna were stationed near the massive stone fireplace, holding court. They looked immaculate. My father, Richard, was in a bespoke tuxedo, looking every bit the successful patriarch. My mother, Helen, was in a shimmering navy gown, her face that tight, smooth. $15,000 face glowed under the soft light. Sienna was draped in a silk slip dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. She was holding a flute of champagne, laughing that high-pitched, performative laugh I had heard in the background while I was gasping for air in my kitchen. The moment I stepped into their line of sight, the atmosphere changed. My mother didn't run to me with relief. She didn't ask how my lungs were feeling. Instead, her face shifted into a mask of practiced, tragic concern. She turned to a group of aunts standing nearby and whispered something, her hand fluttering to her chest. I hadn't even made it to the bar before they cornered me. "Ethan," my father said, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of the surrounding guests. He placed a heavy, controlling hand on my shoulder. "You finally decided to show up. We were worried you'd have another episode. You look pale, son. Are you sure you should be out of bed?" "I'm fine, Dad," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering. "We're so glad you're here, Ethan," Sienna said, stepping forward with a look of faux sympathy. "We've been telling everyone how much the accident affected your nerves. It's okay to be overwhelmed. We're here to help you manage things. We even talked to a friend of Dad's, a specialist, about helping you handle your finances while you recover. You know, so you don't have to worry about the burden of the bills." The word hit me like a physical punch. The burden. They were already laying the groundwork to have me declared incompetent so they could keep the cash flowing. "I'm sure you're very concerned about the bills, Sienna," I said, looking her directly in the eye, "especially since the condo lease is up for renewal next week." Sienna flinched, her smile flickering for a split second, but my mother jumped in, her voice a soothing, gaslighting coo. "Ethan, honey, let's not talk about money now. You're clearly not yourself. Come sit down in the lounge. We've already explained to the family that you've been having a bit of a mental breakdown since the hospital." I looked around the room. I saw the pitying glances from my cousins. I saw the whispered conversations. They had spent the last 2 weeks poisoning the well, making sure that if I spoke up, I would just sound like a crazy person lashing out at his loving family. But then, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. A spotlight hit the podium at the far end of the room. Uncle Victor stepped up, looking like a silver-haired titan of justice. The room fell into a respectful silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor began, his voice resonant and commanding. "Tonight is a celebration of 60 years of my firm's dedication to the truth. We have spent decades uncovering facts, litigating reality, and ensuring that the scales of justice remain balanced." He paused, his eyes sweeping over the crowd until they landed on my parents. "But tonight, I want to talk about a different kind of justice. The kind that happens within the walls of a home. We often hear that family is a sanctuary, but sometimes family is a facade. Sometimes the strong members of a family are treated not as loved ones, but as resources to be mined." A confused murmur rippled through the room. My mother tightened her grip on her silk handkerchief. My father cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "I want to share a story with you," Victor continued. "A story about a man who, for 6 years, was the silent pillar of this family. He paid for the roofs over their heads. He paid for the cars they drove. He even paid for the faces they wear tonight." He clicked a remote in his hand. The massive high-definition screen behind him, usually reserved for firm highlights, flickered to life. It didn't show photos of the Thorne family vacations. It showed a giant, high-resolution screenshot of our family group chat from the night of my accident. The text was blown up so large that everyone in the back of the room could read it. "Mom, Ethan, enough. You have always been such a nuisance and a drain on our energy. We are with Sienna tonight for her launch. Figure it out yourself and stop being so selfish." Right below it was Sienna's response. A laughing emoji and a photo of the three of them clinking glasses. The ballroom went deathly quiet. I watched my mother's face turn a ghostly, chalky white. My father's hand dropped from my shoulder as if it had been burned. "This text," Victor's voice boomed, "was sent while Ethan Thorne was in the back of an ambulance, gasping for air, begging his parents to watch his 4-year-old son so he wouldn't be left alone while his father went into emergency surgery." Victor clicked the remote again. A spreadsheet appeared. It was my record of the last 6 years, but it was overlaid with Victor's title searches and bank records. "Let's talk about the mortgage," Victor said. "For 4 years, Ethan sent $3,200 a month to save his parents' home. But as you can see from the title search on the left, Richard and Helen Thorne paid off that house in 2018. The money Ethan sent went directly here." The screen shifted to show photos of Sienna's luxury downtown condo, the designer furniture, the receipts for her influencer trips. "And finally," Victor said, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous tone, "the cardiac emergency." He pulled up the $15,000 wire transfer I had sent 2 years ago. Right next to it, he displayed the invoice from the Bellevue Plastic Surgery Center. Ethan Thorne worked 80 hours a week because he thought his mother was dying. In reality, he was paying for her neck lift. The silence in the room broke into a cacophony of gasps and sharp, angry whispers. I saw my Aunt Susan, a woman who had always been cold to me because my mother told her I was greedy, to cover her mouth in horror. I saw my cousin staring at Sienna with pure disgust. My father stepped forward, his face a mottled purple. "This is private, Victor. You've lost your mind. You're airing family laundry in public." "No, Richard," Victor said, looking down at him from the podium. "I'm airing the truth. You told this entire room that Ethan was mentally unstable. I think the data shows that Ethan is the only person in this family who has been standing on solid ground." I stepped forward then, moving into the light of the projector. I didn't feel erratic. I didn't feel confused. I felt like the architect. I was someone who had finally found the flaw in the foundation and was ready to tear the whole building down. "I didn't come here to humiliate you," I said, my voice carrying through the silent ballroom. "I came here because for 32 years, I was told that my value was measured by how much I could provide. I was told that if I just gave enough, I would finally be worth your time." I looked at my mother. Her new face was twisted in a snarl of shame. "I'm done being the stable one," I said. "I am officially resigning as your bank. I have already canceled the payments. The condo lease is in my name, and Sienna, you have 72 hours to vacate. Dad, the Audi is in my name, too. I'll be sending a tow truck to pick it up on Monday." "Ethan, you can't!" Sienna shrieked, her voice cracking. "You're ruining my life." "No," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "I'm just letting you live your own life. You've always called me a drain. Well, the drain is empty. Figure it out yourself." The irony of those words, the very words they had sent me while I was dying, hung in the air like a guillotine. My father tried to speak, but the people around him, his friends, his peers, were already stepping away from him. The social capital he had built on my back had evaporated in less than 10 minutes. I turned to Victor and gave him a small, solemn nod. Then, I walked back to Sarah, picked up Leo, and walked out of the ballroom. As the heavy oak doors closed behind me, I heard the room erupt into a roar of conversation. But I didn't look back. I walked down the grand staircase, out into the cool, crisp Seattle air, and for the first time in my entire adult life, I took a breath that didn't hurt. I was standing in the quiet, marble foyer, adjusting Leo's coat, when the heavy oak doors of the ballroom swung open. I expected my mother's tears, or my sister's screams. Instead, I got my father's rage. Richard Thorne stormed toward me, his face a mottled shade of violet that clashed horribly with his black tie attire. He didn't look like a father. He looked like a landlord who had just been told his building was condemned. "Ethan, get back in there and tell them Victor is lying," he hissed, his voice trembling with a mix of fury and desperation. "You've humiliated us in front of everyone who matters. Do you have any idea what this does to our reputation, to Sienna's brand?" I stood my ground, holding Leo's hand firmly. For 32 years, that voice had made me feel small. Tonight, it just sounded like static. "Reputation?" I asked, my voice calm and low. "You're worried about your reputation after you told your dying son he was a nuisance? You're worried about a brand that was built on stolen money?" "It wasn't stolen," he snapped. "We raised you. We gave you everything. You owe us that support. It's the least a successful son can do. I paid the debt of my upbringing 10 times over." "Dad," I replied, "I paid for your lies. I paid for Mom's vanity. I paid for a sister who laughed at the thought of me dying. But the bank is closed. As of 5 minutes ago, I've revoked your access to the secondary accounts. The Audi in your driveway? The GPS tracker is already live. A recovery team will be there at 8 a.m. Monday morning." My mother, Helen, appeared in the doorway behind him, clutching her silk wrap as if it could shield her from the truth. She didn't look like the poised socialite anymore. She looked hollow. "Ethan, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We have no other way to pay the utilities. We'll be in the dark by next month." I really looked at her at the face I had literally bought for her. "Then I guess you'll have to do what you told me to do in that ambulance. Mom, you'll have to figure it out. Maybe you can sell some of those designer bags I bought you for your birthdays. Or maybe Sienna can sell that creative studio furniture." Sienna pushed past them, her eyes red with a mix of anger and genuine panic. "You're evicting me? Ethan, that's my home. Where am I supposed to go?" "You have a college degree." "Sienna," I said, stepping toward the exit, "and you have the magnetic personality Mom and Dad always bragged about. Use it to get a job, a real one that requires a clock-in and a paycheck, because the Ethan Thorne scholarship has been permanently revoked." I turned my back on them. My father shouted something about disinheriting me, which was a joke, considering I was the only one with butt-key assets, but I didn't stop walking. As I stepped out into the cool night air, Uncle Victor caught up with me at the valet stand. He reached into his pocket and handed me a small, brass key. "What's this?" I asked. "The keys to my cabin in the Cascades," Victor said, his eyes softening. "Take Leo. Disconnect for a week. My firm is handling the formal notices for the car and the condo. You don't have to speak to them again, Ethan. From here on out, they have to go through me." I took the key, a lump forming in my throat. "Thank you, Victor, for everything." "Don't thank me," he said, patting my shoulder. "You're the one who survived the storm. I just turned on the lights so people could see the wreckage." I buckled Leo into his car seat. As I pulled out of the club's driveway, I saw my parents standing under the grand portico. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at the ballroom, at the dozens of people inside who were currently rewriting their opinion of the perfect Thorne family. They had called me a drain. They had called me a nuisance. But as I drove away, I realized that I wasn't the drain at all. I was the plug. And now that I was gone, their entire world was finally, inevitably, swirling down the hole they had dug for themselves. I reached over and squeezed Leo's hand. "We're free. Buddy, can we get ice cream?" he asked, yawning. "Everything," I said. "We can do everything now." It has been exactly 1 year since that night at the Golden Country Club, and the view from my life looks entirely different now. I'm standing on the balcony of my new home, a modest, sunlight-filled townhome in a quiet neighborhood north of the city. It's not a high-rise luxury condo, and it doesn't have a view of a private lake, but every square inch of it belongs to ME and LEO. There are no secret shell accounts here. There are no hidden agendas. Just the smell of the pine trees and the sound of my son laughing in the next room as he plays with the dog we finally had the time and space to adopt. The fallout for my family was swift, absolute, and entirely of their own making. Without my $3,200 monthly mortgage payment, my parents' house of cards collapsed within 90 days. It turns out that even when a house is paid off, the property taxes, insurance, and the upkeep on a 4,000 square foot estate are staggering. My father tried to take out a second mortgage to maintain their lifestyle, but with no steady income and a reputation that had been decimated in the local legal community, no bank would touch him. They sold the house 6 months ago. From what Uncle Victor tells me, they moved into a small 2-bedroom rental near the airport. My father is working part-time at a local hardware store, and my mother is doing bookkeeping for a small church. They aren't starving, but for the first time in their lives, they are learning the true meaning of the word practical. Sienna's skincare empire died the moment the marketing checks stopped clearing. Without the polished studio I was bankrolling. Her visionary brand was revealed for what it always was, an expensive hobby. She tried to reach out to me once, 3 months ago, through a new number. Her voicemail wasn't an apology. It was a demand for seed money to restart her life. I didn't even listen to the whole thing before I hit delete. Last I heard, she's working as a junior receptionist at a dental office. She's finally clocking in, finally earning her own way, and finally living in the reality she tried so hard to escape. As for me, the $5,000 I used to spend every month on their lies now goes into a high-yield college fund for Leo. By the time he's 18, he won't just have a degree. He'll have a foundation. He'll never have to wonder if he's a burden or a nuisance, because his father was too busy buying someone else's love. Uncle Victor and Aunt Sarah have become the grandparents Leo deserves. They're here every Sunday for dinner. We don't talk about investments or branding. We talk about Leo's soccer games, my latest project at work, and the peace that comes with living an honest life. I recently found the old spreadsheet on my laptop, the one that tracked the $280,000 I gave away. I didn't feel angry when I looked at it this time. I felt a strange sense of gratitude. Not for them, but for the version of me that was strong enough to keep walking when the path got dark. That money was the price of my freedom. It was an expensive lesson, but I'd pay it 10 times over to be where I am today. If you've made it this far with me, I want to leave you with one final thought. We are often told that family is everything, that blood is a bond you can never break, no matter how much it bleeds you dry. But I've learned that family isn't a debt you're born into. It's a choice you make every day. If the people in your life only see you as a utility, a resource, or a drain on their energy, it is okay to turn off the power. Choosing yourself isn't a betrayal. Setting a boundary isn't an act of war. Sometimes, the most practical thing you can do is walk away from a house of cards and start building something real. You are not a nuisance. You are not a burden. And you are, certainly, not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. It's meant the world to me to share it with you. If this resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose your own peace over a toxic tradition, please hit that like button and subscribe. I want to leave you with one question. If you stopped providing for the people who take you for granted today, who would still be standing by your side tomorrow? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be there reading them. Until next time, take care of yourself. You've earned it. This image is completely not real. It is just a product of Photoshop and AI, used to illustrate the content only. Don't believe in that. Verify the information and prove that this image is not real. The stories and images on this channel are inspired by real experiences and online communities like Reddit for privacy and storytelling purposes. Names, dates, and certain details have been changed or created using AI. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events, is purely coincidental. This content is intended for entertainment and emotional reflection only. Viewer discretion is advised. Thank you for supporting our creative work.